At 82, Stefanie Powers finally tells the truth about William Holden. Hollywood is full of love stories that dazzle on red carpets, flash in headlines, and then fade as quickly as they arrived. But there are some relationships that are so real, so passionate, and so heartbreaking that they leave a mark on history. Stefanie Powers and William Holden's story is one of those rare romances. He was a Hollywood legend, she was a rising star, and together they shared a bond filled with passion, pain, and purpose. At 82 years old, Stefanie Powers has finally spoken openly about the truth of their relationship, the highs, the lows, and the haunting tragedy that has followed her for decades. What she revealed shows us that even in the glittering world of fame, love can be complicated, fragile, and unforgettable. Stefanie Powers, the woman behind the spotlight. Stefanie Powers was never content to simply be a pretty face in Hollywood. Born in Hollywood itself in 1942, she grew up surrounded by the glamour and illusions of the movie industry. She started acting at a young age, quickly moving from small television appearances to larger film roles. By the 1970s, she had achieved international fame with her role as Jennifer Hart in Hart, a series that turned her into a household name. But behind the screen persona, Stefanie was more than an actress. She was intelligent, outspoken, and full of curiosity about the world. While many in the industry lived and breathed fame, Stefanie longed for meaning beyond the camera. Her independence often made her stand out in a business that expected actresses to conform. She had a strong personality, a quick wit, and a natural charm that drew people to her. But she also carried within her a desire for authenticity, for love that was not based on appearances. That desire set the stage for her connection with William Holden. To understand Stefanie, one must also understand her ability to see people beyond their reputations. She never viewed Holden as just the Academy Award winner or the leading man from films like Stalag 17 and Network. She saw him as a man flawed and vulnerable, but deeply human. She has since said that what made their relationship so meaningful was that it was not about Hollywood's illusions. It was about real emotion, real struggles, and real love. At 82, looking back, Stefanie admits that her life could have been far easier had she chosen someone less complicated. But in her words, true love rarely comes in simple packages. She was drawn to Holden's brilliance, his charm, and his pain. She wanted to understand him, to care for him, and to share her life with him, even when she knew it would not be easy. Her journey with him shaped not only her personal life, but also her entire legacy. William Holden, Hollywood's golden man with dark shadows. William Holden was one of the brightest stars Hollywood had ever produced. Born William Franklin Beadle Jr. in 1918, he rose from modest beginnings to become one of the most bankable actors of his time. With boyish good looks and undeniable charisma, he captured audiences in films like Sunset Boulevard and The Bridge on the River Kwai. He won an Academy Award for Stalag 17, solidifying his place as a Hollywood legend. By the 1950s and 60s, he was one of the highest-paid actors in the world, working alongside icons like Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, and Humphrey Bogart. To the outside world, Holden's life seemed like a dream. But behind the fame and fortune, Holden carried shadows that fame could not erase. He struggled with alcoholism for much of his adult life. The pressure to remain relevant in an industry obsessed with youth haunted him as he grew older. He was divorced, sometimes lonely, and often turned to alcohol as an escape from the pressures of stardom. While his rugged looks and effortless talent made him a favorite on screen, off-screen he was fighting battles that few ever saw. By the time Stefanie Powers entered his life, Holden was already in his 50s, with decades of fame behind him. Many considered him past his prime, but Stefanie saw something different. She saw the man behind the legend, someone who still had depth, passion, and brilliance. Their age difference did not matter to her. What mattered was the connection they shared. Holden was a man who had lived fast and hard. He had known fame at its height and despair at its depths. Stefanie later said that what made him so compelling was not just his charm but also his fragility. She loved him not because he was perfect but because he was imperfect. And while she adored his wit and intellect, she also recognized the darkness that consumed him. This duality of brilliance and brokenness made him both irresistible and tragic. Their love was set against this backdrop of success and self-destruction, creating a romance that was as intense as it was unstable, an unlikely love story. When Stefanie Powers and William Holden began their relationship, many in Hollywood raised eyebrows. She was vibrant and youthful. He was older and already a legend. The age difference was considerable, and skeptics whispered that it could not possibly work. But what critics failed to see was the depth of their bond. Their relationship was not based on superficial attraction. It was built on shared values, humor, and a passion for life that connected them in profound ways. Stefanie has described how Holden made her feel truly seen. In an industry where women were often judged only for their beauty, Holden appreciated her intelligence and independence. He valued her opinions, encouraged her voice, and admired her strength. For Stefanie, Holden provided a kind of validation she had rarely found in Hollywood men. For Holden, Stefanie represented vitality and hope. She was younger, yes, but she was also wise beyond her years. She was grounded, curious, and devoted. In her, he found not just a lover, but a partner who cared for him deeply. Their love was unconventional, but it was real. They traveled together, shared adventures, and became deeply involved in causes that mattered to them both. Yet, beneath their affection was always the shadow of Holden's drinking. Stefanie later confessed that she often felt like she was living with two different men: the brilliant, loving partner when he was sober and the distant, troubled soul when he was drinking. This duality made their relationship both exhilarating and exhausting. They loved each other passionately, but their love was tested constantly by the demons Holden carried with him. Despite the challenges, Stefanie has said that she never doubted the sincerity of their bond. What they shared was authentic, even if it was messy. Looking back, she admits that it may not have been a fairy tale romance, but it was the kind of love that shapes a person forever. For her, Holden was not just a chapter in her life story, he was a defining force that left a permanent imprint on her heart. The struggles behind closed doors. To the outside world, Stefanie Powers and William Holden seemed like a glamorous pair. When they appeared together, cameras flashed and magazines painted them as a Hollywood romance to envy. Yet, as Stefanie has revealed in later years, what happened behind closed doors told a far more complicated story. Loving Holden meant living with a man who was constantly fighting against his own demons, and for Stefanie, that struggle became part of her daily reality. Alcohol was the greatest shadow looming over their relationship. Holden's drinking was not just occasional, it was a chronic battle, one that had followed him for years. Stefanie described nights when he would drink until he became unrecognizable, slipping into moods that were distant, irritable, or even despairing. For her, it often felt like she was living with two different men: the charming, witty, compassionate partner she adored when sober, and the haunted, unreachable man who emerged after too many drinks. She wanted desperately to save him, believing that her love and devotion could heal the wounds that drove him to alcohol. But the more she tried, the more she realized that addiction is not something love alone can conquer. Their arguments often centered around his drinking. Stefanie has admitted to moments of deep frustration and helplessness. There were times when she had to choose between standing by him and preserving her own well-being. Yet, despite the pain, she never considered walking away for good. She loved him with a devotion that was both inspiring and heartbreaking, staying even when it meant enduring the storms of his addiction. There was also the pressure of Hollywood itself. Holden was an older star in an industry obsessed with youth and novelty. He felt the weight of fading relevance, and that fear only drove him deeper into alcohol. Stefanie saw how fame, which had once made him shine, was now a burden he carried like a curse. For her, every moment of joy with him was tempered by the fear of losing him to the bottle. Looking back, she admits that those struggles were some of the hardest parts of her life. Yet, she does not speak of them with bitterness. Instead, she frames them as part of the truth, that real love is messy, complicated, and often painful. Behind the glamour of Hollywood was a woman trying to love a man she could not always save, and that reality became the defining challenge of their time together. A shared passion: conservation in Africa. If there was one thing that gave Stefanie and Holden strength as a couple, it was their shared love for wildlife conservation. Both were deeply passionate about protecting the natural world, and it was in Africa that they found their truest bond. Away from the chaos of Hollywood and the pressures of fame, the two of them discovered peace and purpose in the wild landscapes of Kenya and other parts of the continent. Holden had long been an advocate for conservation. He purchased land in Kenya and helped establish programs to protect endangered species. Stefanie, equally captivated by the cause, joined him with enthusiasm. Together, they worked on the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, an organization dedicated to education, research, and the protection of animals. For Stefanie, those trips to Africa were more than just projects. They were lifelines. She saw a different side of Holden when they were there. Away from the bars and the pressures of his career, he was alive, curious, and engaged. He would spend hours observing animals, speaking with conservationists, and planning ways to make a difference. In Africa, Holden's demons seemed to loosen their grip. Stefanie often said those moments were when she truly believed he could overcome his struggles. They shared adventures, from long days under the hot sun to quiet nights listening to the sounds of the wilderness. Those memories, Stefanie later revealed, became some of the most cherished of her life. She saw a man who, despite his flaws, had a heart capable of immense compassion and vision. Their work in Africa also gave their love a sense of purpose beyond themselves. It was not just about their relationship, it was about leaving a mark on the world. That mission became Stefanie's lifelong calling. After Holden's death, she carried on their conservation work with even greater determination, ensuring that his passion lived on. Looking back, Stefanie has said that Africa was where their relationship felt most pure. In the simplicity of nature, stripped of Hollywood distractions, they found something eternal. For all the struggles they endured at home, In Africa, they were partners in every sense, working side by side for a cause that mattered deeply. It was there that Stefanie understood both the greatness of Holden's spirit and the tragedy of the battles he could never fully win. The tragic night of William Holden's death. The night of William Holden's death remains one of the darkest chapters in Hollywood history. On November 12, 1981, Holden was alone in his Santa Monica apartment. He had been drinking heavily, as he often did in those years. Sometime during the night, he tripped, fell, and struck his head on a bedside table. The injury caused a severe wound, and because he was intoxicated, he did not seek help. He bled to death, alone, without anyone there to save him. When news of his death broke, the world was shocked. William Holden, the Hollywood icon, the Academy Award-winning actor, was gone at the age of 63. The headlines described the accident, but for Stefanie Powers, the tragedy was personal and devastating. She was thousands of miles away, working on a project, when she learned the news. The guilt that followed her was overwhelming. She could not escape the thought that if she had been there, maybe she could have saved him. What made his death so painful for Stefanie was not just the manner of it, but the loneliness of it. For a man who had been adored by millions, who had lived in the spotlight for decades, to die alone in such a way was unbearably tragic. Stefanie has since spoken about the cruel irony that a man who gave so much joy to the world on screen could not find enough peace off screen to save himself. The days after his death were filled with grief, confusion, and reflection. Tributes poured in from Hollywood and beyond. Friends, colleagues, and fans mourned the loss of a legend. But for Stefanie, the grief was deeper than any public tribute could capture. She had lost not only a partner, but also the man she had fought to love through the darkest of times. His death marked the end of their story together, but it also marked the beginning of her lifelong mission to keep his memory alive through the causes they had shared. For Stefanie, the tragedy of that night has never truly faded. Even decades later, when she speaks of Holden's death, there is a weight in her words. It was a loss that changed her forever, shaping the woman she would become and the path she would walk for the rest of her life. Stefanie Powers after Holden. After Holden's death, Stefanie Powers faced a crossroads. She could have turned inward, consumed by grief, and withdrawn from the world. Instead, she chose a different path to honor Holden's memory by continuing the work they had started together. She became the head of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, dedicating her life to conservation and education. Through the foundation, she built schools, funded research, and created opportunities for young people to learn about protecting the environment. In doing so, she turned tragedy into purpose. Her commitment to the cause gave her strength, but it did not erase the pain. Stefanie often admitted that she carried Holden with her every day, both as a memory and as a lesson. She became outspoken about the dangers of alcoholism, speaking from her own experience of loving someone who struggled with it. She urged others to recognize the signs, to offer support, and to understand that addiction is a disease that can destroy even the most talented lives. Professionally, Stefanie continued acting, but her career took a back seat to her mission. While she remained admired for her performances, especially her enduring role in Hart, she became equally respected for her conservation work. She traveled the world, spoke at conferences, and dedicated her time to building a legacy that would honor Holden far beyond Hollywood. Personally, Stefanie found strength in resilience. She never remarried, though she had relationships after Holden. She often said that what they had shared was unique, and it shaped her view of love forever. At 82, she has lived a full life, but one that has always been intertwined with Holden's memory. For Stefanie, life after Holden was not about escaping the past, but about carrying it forward. She became proof that from the deepest grief can come the greatest purpose. By dedicating her life to causes they had once shared, she ensured that Holden's story did not end with his tragic death, but continued in the lives of those touched by the Foundation's work. The truth she reveals at 82. For decades, Stefanie Powers remained private about many aspects of her relationship with Holden. She spoke of him lovingly, honored his memory, but often left details unsaid. Now, at the age of 82, she has finally revealed the full truth, not just about his struggles, but about her own. She admitted that loving Holden was both the greatest joy and the deepest heartbreak of her life. She spoke candidly about the frustration of watching someone she adored destroy himself with alcohol. She described the helplessness of trying to save him, only to realize that he had to choose to save himself. She confessed the guilt that haunted her after his death, the endless questions of what she could have done differently. But she also shared the beauty of their love. She remembered the laughter, the adventures, and the moments of tenderness that made it all worth it. She spoke about Africa, about the joy they found in their shared mission, and about the way Holden inspired her to dedicate her life to something greater than herself. Her truth is not bitter. It is not filled with regret. Instead, it is filled with acceptance. She acknowledges the pain, but she also celebrates the love. At 82, she has the wisdom to see that their story was not about perfection but about humanity. It was about two people who loved each other deeply, even when life was messy and difficult. And by telling the truth now, she ensures that Holden is remembered not just as a tragic figure, but as a man who was loved, who had purpose, and who left a lasting impact. The weight of survivor's guilt, one of the most heartbreaking truths Stefanie has admitted at 82, is the heavy survivor's guilt she carried after William Holden's death. She often wondered if she could have prevented the tragedy, if she had been home, if she had convinced him to get help earlier, or if she had insisted he face his drinking more directly. Those what-ifs haunted her for years. Survivor's guilt is a common thread among those who lose loved ones suddenly, and for Stefanie, it lingered because Holden died alone. Even as she built a purposeful life after his passing, the knowledge that she could not be there in his final hours became a silent shadow she lived with for decades. By speaking openly about it now, she not only lifts some of that burden from herself, but also helps others understand the profound, unspoken toll of losing someone to addiction and loneliness. Why she never stopped loving him. Although Stefanie moved forward with her life and even found companionship again, she never stopped loving William Holden. She has said that what they shared was unique, not perfect, not easy, but irreplaceable. She described him as her great love, the man who shaped her view of relationships forever. Even 40 years after his passing, she still speaks of him with tenderness, recalling small moments of joy, the sound of his laugh, the passion he had for animals, the way he lit up when they were in Africa together. That enduring love shows that some bonds do not fade with time. They live on in memory, in the work carried forward, and in the quiet spaces of the heart. For Stefanie, Holden was not just part of her past. He is still part of her present, woven into everything she has done since. At 82, Stefanie Powers has finally peeled back the curtain on her life with William Holden, and the truth is as heartbreaking as it is beautiful. She admits their love was raw, imperfect, and often shadowed by his lifelong battle with alcoholism. Behind the glamour of Hollywood, she lived with two men in one body: the brilliant, witty partner who adored her, and the haunted soul lost to drink. She fought to save him, but she now accepts that love alone cannot conquer addiction. What Stefanie also reveals is the weight of survivor's guilt. When Holden died alone in 1981 after a fall in his Santa Monica apartment, she was thousands of miles away. For decades, she wondered if her presence might have changed that night. That guilt shaped her life, but so did the love they shared. She never stopped cherishing his passion for Africa and wildlife conservation, and she devoted her life to continuing that mission through the William Holden Wildlife Foundation. Even after 40 years, Stefanie calls him her great love, the man who shaped her view of relationships forever. Her truth is not bitter but tender. It is a legacy of love, loss, and purpose, proof that some bonds do not fade with time but live on in memory, in work, and in the heart. A legacy of love and loss. The story of Stefanie Powers and William Holden is more than just another Hollywood romance. It is a story that reflects the complexities of love, the struggles of addiction, and the resilience of the human spirit. Holden's legacy lives on not only through his unforgettable films, but through the Wildlife Foundation that Stefanie has kept alive for decades. His name continues to inspire conservation work, his memory intertwined with the survival of species and the education of future generations. For Stefanie, his legacy is also personal. She has carried him with her through every chapter of her life, honoring him not by clinging to the past, but by transforming it into something meaningful. Her honesty at 82 ensures that the world understands the full picture, not just the glamorous headlines, but the truth of a love that was both beautiful and painful. Their story is a reminder that behind every star is a human being with flaws, struggles, and vulnerabilities. It reminds us that love is not always enough to save someone, but it is powerful enough to endure even after death. Stefanie's courage in sharing her truth shows us that grief can lead to growth, and that loss can become a foundation for purpose. In the end, the legacy of Stefanie Powers and William Holden is not one of tragedy alone. It is a legacy of love, of lessons, and of lasting impact. Their story continues to inspire, reminding us that even in Hollywood, a place often filled with illusions, there are stories of real humanity that deserve to be told. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more powerful stories from Hollywood's past and present, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Iconic Legends. Your support helps us keep bringing you the untold truths and unforgettable moments that shape the stars we all know.